You're listening to the Mind Over Finger podcast, episode number 65.
Welcome to the Mind Over Finger podcast, discussions on mindful music making, efficient practice, and building a purposeful career. And now, your host, Dr. Renee Paul Gauthier.
Hi, everyone. If you're listening to this episode on the day it's coming out, March 20th, 2020, you're probably like the rest of us trying to get your footing in this new reality that we're all facing. All of those social distancing measures, kids out of school, concerts canceled, all of us moving to online education. There's so much going on. So I'm really happy that my guest today is violinist and composer Kimberlee Dray, because Kimberlee is an incredible example of adaptability, of resourcefulness and courage in the face of adversity. And I can't think of a better message to share today than her story. I've been following Kimberlee on Instagram for a long time. She's the one and only green case girl. And I finally got to connect with her personally last summer during the virtual string summit. And I feel like I made a dear friend that day. And by the way, you can have a chance to catch the summit again absolutely free starting next week. And I'll have more details about that after the interview and in the show notes. Before the interview, let me give you a few details about Kimberlee. After stepping away from her musical path to take care of her family, Kimberlee picked up her instrument again when she was diagnosed with Menieres Disease, a disorder of the inner ear where symptoms can range from severe dizziness and ringing in the ears to permanent hearing loss. For Kimberlee, healing took the form of a highly motivated return to the violin, and her subsequent dedication eventually lessened symptoms and brought on a remission. Kimberlee's offbeat path led to performances in masterclasses for luminaries such as Joseph Silverstein and Elmar Oliveira, to study with Aaron Roseanne and Sherry Kloss, and culminated in a 3-year commute from Seattle to New York City to train with Nina Bellina. As Kimberlee puts it, juggling 4 children and advanced violin study required healthy doses of negotiating and creativity, bribes, begging, and freezer meals. Since returning to her musical career, Kimberlee has soloed for orchestras and performed for Recital series throughout the United States. She's also premiered her own composition for solo violin and completed a commission for violin and piano premiered by Sherry Kloss at the Yasha Heifetz Symposium. In this episode, Kimberlee talks about her return to music, how she answered the call, and how she let no obstacles stand in the way of her following her dream path. Kimberlee strives to wake others who have allowed their music to lapse, inviting them back and standing as witness of the power of music to heal. She hopes her music will illustrate the potential of motivated work and the possibilities when one answers an inner call. I drew so much inspiration from my conversation with Kimberlee, and I know you will too. Let's go to the show. Kimberlee Dray, I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Not as excited as I am to be here. Thank you for this opportunity, Renee Paul.
Kimberlee, I've been following you online for a long time, actually, and I was so excited when we were introduced virtually through the virtual string summit last summer, and it was so much fun. And I have, grown to know you even more, and I am just so inspired by you. I love your energy, your sense of humor, and just you are someone who's so fully authentic and inspiring, and I'm just so excited that we get this chance to sit down and chat a little bit today.
Oh gosh, it's so mutual. I have been following you for such a long time, and I feel quite similar about you. You are a powerhouse. I can't believe all of the good that you're doing and the many people that are helped by this podcast. And every time I have an opportunity, I try to make sure people are aware of the gold mine that is here.
Oh, thank you so much. Kimberlee, I always start the show by letting the guests talk to us a little bit about them. But in your case, I want to bring out a quote I saw on your website that just made my heart sing. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away. I just love this quote so much. And I wanted to bring it up before I let you tell us about yourself. Tell us how it resonates for you, this quote.
Well, this is Henry David Thoreau, of course, from Walden. And I have such a strange story with my relationship to the violin. It doesn't follow any of the traditional paths at all. And so I feel like my relationship to my violin really is embodied by that quotation. I also often say that if I were a Muppet, I would be Gonzo, because Gonzo's the whatever. So, yes, as far as that, my story, I was the oldest of 12 children. So I was destined to be a mom prodigy, if anything. From the time I was quite young, maybe even 6 years old, I was, really watching over my brothers and sisters, and they came, yearly or every couple years. And I am grateful to be the oldest of those 12 children, but it was just a very different kind of growing up experience than most musicians have. My parents were not musicians. I did not grow up in a place that had access to great teachers. There wasn't we didn't even know about summer music festivals. I just was kind of a normal kid. And while most prodigies were probably, ripping up, Lalo for 4 hours a day, I was digging a hole in my backyard trying to have a swimming pool and thinking that if I dug it and put a tarp in there that, we did make a really good mud pit though. So that, that was great, but we weren't successful. That's just to say, I maybe practiced a half an hour a day, and there was one violin teacher in town, but I loved music from a very young age, and I like to compose. So my mom would just let me go, and I'd go in the piano room and I would just kind of keep on playing whatever came to my mind. And so I think music was always in me. It's just that maybe I wasn't so directed or so focused the way most musicians are from the outset. And I was kind of a wild child anyway. It would have been really hard to, it still is hard to bundle all this energy. But in any case, I love the violin. And by the time I got to be maybe a, sophomore, junior in high school, then I was really practicing hours, probably, 3-4 hours a day. I didn't think of myself as anything much. I knew that there were so many kids who were so much more talented than I was. I didn't even try for a scholarship. That's a story in and of itself. But eventually I did get a scholarship, and that was kind of the shock of my life. I had always planned on doing something completely unrelated to music. But when I got that big scholarship, I thought, I'm just going to go for it. And the reason I went for it, to be honest, is because there was this one piece, the Lark Ascending, and I wanted to learn that with all of my heart. So the only reason I actually went into music was because I wanted to learn that piece.
Wow.
And I quickly, because I loved it, I quickly kind of blew out of that program, because you see, you have to have a base in theory. And I think I just barely squeaked by on the allophorus test in the beginning. And, this was all very new for me. And so I was very much drowning in that program. And not only that, but I had a lot of imposter syndrome sorts of feelings in my brain, knowing that I came as a scholarship student, knowing that I was in the most coveted teacher studio with graduate students and seniors, and feeling completely unworthy and completely out of my element. My last memory of before I quit the music school was of getting up to play the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto at the first movement in master class. And I got up, and the only thing in my brain is, you're not a violinist. You don't belong. You're not one of them. And my brain blanked out. And even though I knew that movement, I couldn't see anything in my head. My whole body froze up, and I ran out crying. I know, it's very dramatic. And then I got married, and I went that track.
That's a good transition.
I did. I mean, you really could make some sort of soap opera out of it, really. There she goes, crying off into the, distance, and then she gets married. But in any case, I got married, and I was a mom. And there really wasn't money for violin lessons, but, it was deep in me, because I would sometimes sneak it out and just try to practice here and there, but it just never really worked out for a variety of reasons. And I don't really talk about these 10 years that went down, but basically I was doing a lot of other things. I had a handbag business. I ran marathons. We did a lot of things. I had 3 children. Towards the end of that time, as I was running, I started having some symptoms. I felt like I was being sucked down a hole. I would fall over with dizziness, and my ears would plug up, and I would go completely deaf. And it would last anywhere from 10 to 10 minutes to half an hour. For a little while, I was dizzy constantly for maybe a month, and I was falling down all over my house. I was kind of crawling, couldn't really get up a whole lot, and eventually kind of came out of that fog. And then I just kept having these attacks, and I would have, 20 a day or something in the beginning. And that was hard because I had 3 children at home, and I finally got a diagnosis. They call that Menieres Disease. And it looks a little different for everybody. Everybody's symptoms are a little different. But we all share 4 classic symptoms. In any case, was really concerned about how I was going to raise these children, and and possibly, because you're losing your ears, both your balance and your hearing. And I thought, how am I going to be a mom? How am I going to live my life? I'm only 29 years old, and I have a lot of life left. And some of the things that I was reading were quite upsetting. There are people who literally are in bed all day long in kind of a state of disconnection with anything because they've lost their balance. And so after reading those horror stories, it was probably one of the most important transformative experiences of my life. And I would not give it up for anything, because in that moment, I realized a few things about life. And number one is that you can't count on tomorrow. And I was so worried about, like, what's going to happen and how much worse is it going to get? And I'd worry so much about that I forgot, you could get hit by a car tomorrow.
Yep.
Like, you aren't even entitled to the very next breath that you're going to take. So everything that you have is a gift. Your ears are a gift. You're lucky if you wake up in the morning and you can hear. And that was extremely important. And another transformative thing that I learned in that moment was, so let's not worry about what's coming. Let's just think about today. Okay, so today I had 20 attacks. It was really annoying. But did I get the kids out of bed? Yes. Did we get on yes, we got it all done, and we had another day. And then you could just be kind of grateful for the day. And the second one is really, I felt like it's time for me to enjoy my hearing while I have it. So I got my violin out again after really 10 years of not practicing. And in the beginning, I could only do 5 minutes. And I'm not kidding about that. I had a little neuropathy in my fingers in the beginning. And I would just leave my violin out on the bed and close the door. And all day, I would grab it for 5 minutes. And then that increased to maybe 10 minutes. And then it was 20 minutes. And after a while, it was 20-minute stretches, 8 or 10 times a day. And after a while, those hours really start bulking up. And I think it's just a gradual process of working back in. Well, after, you start practicing, 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever it is, a day, you kind of improve.
Mm-hmm.
And to make a long story short, basically all sorts of doors started opening up for me. And I still think it's miraculous. I don't even know how this happened for myself. I am very grateful to Sherry Kloss, who has the Yasha Heifetz Symposium, which is now not running anymore. But so that gave me opportunities to play for luminaries such as Elmar Oliveira and Joseph Silverstein and Aaron Rosand. And that was an incredible opportunity. Now, it is odd for a mommy of 4 to leave, go across the country just for the opportunity to play for this luminary hero of hers with no other object other than to just say, at the end of this, I will be able to forever say I played for Aaron Rosand. And really, that was all it was. I just wanted so badly. But then I got there and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to play for Aaron Rosand. What are you thinking? Mm-hmm. And luckily, I had a friend there who said, Aaron Rosand listens to violinists every day, all day. It's his job. He's heard plenty of violinists before you, and he'll hear you too. And it really was such fantastic advice because, I mean, really, what do you have to lose? So I did, and he invited me to Summit Music Festival to study with him one summer. Incredible opportunity. I will forever be grateful for that. I also was, I don't know, just little things would pop up. I've been able to play in recital series. I've been able to play with orchestra. I've had, I don't know, and then probably the biggest one that came up was an opportunity to study with Nina Belina for really the last few years of her life. And I went nuts one day. I was given the opportunity to play for her, and I finished playing, and she said, so is this it then? You're just going to go home? And that was that. And that was great. And Renee Paul, I lost my mind. And I said, I can come once a month. And then I had to go home and talk to my husband about how we were going to downsize our house because we needed to afford flying me from Seattle to New York once a month. And we did that for about 2.5 to 3 years is how I did that. And I know it's really, I wouldn't recommend it. I would say to all young students, go do it the regular route if you can. Don't have children and then have, get into education. It's much harder. It's the backwards way. But I will say that Suzuki was very right when he said, where love is deep, much can be accomplished. And I just love this instrument. I do. I can't drown it out. There's nothing I can do to stop it. And in fact, my symptoms of Menieres disease, after about 5 years of really heavy duty practicing, they started to diminish until they went into remission. And I've really mostly been in remission for the last 8 years. Wow. As long as I practice. I've only had 2 relapses, and they have been related to my not practicing for an extended period of time. So anyone who doubts that music is healing, I'm here as a witness. It is. And I always say that I think I went deaf because I wasn't listening to myself. Wow. And I think if you have the inner fire, if you love it, what are you going to do? You're cursed. You have to.
I love that you use the word fire because whenever I see you online, whether it's a video that you've posted of you playing or a story that you tell us or something that you wrote, I really feel so inspired. I've said it before, but I really feel inspired by what you put out there. And I think it's because you have that fire and we feel it. That's for sure. A quote I saw on your website that I also love, and I think that when I hear you tell us your incredible story, it really comes to life. And here it is. Kimberlee strives to wake others who have allowed their music to lapse, inviting them back and standing as witness of the power of music to heal. She hopes her music will illustrate the potential of motivated work and the possibilities when one answers an inner call. And I love that last little bit, when one answers that inner call. And I am so glad that you listened to it and you answered to that call, because I feel like you are really not only inspiring me, but inspiring so many others through your enthusiasm, which is contagious, by the way. And you show us that one can choose how they view and how they face adversity, and you don't have to be defined by what
Yeah.
is, but at any time you can completely forge your own path. There's no rule that says that you have to walk in the footsteps that are ahead of you. You can really answer the call, exactly, if I am to use your own words. So I love your life story so much.
Oh, that is very humbling. And that's everything I want my life to be about. Really, it's my real passion is that I feel like there are too many like me who close the case. And that teachers who put these incredibly talented young people, and they graduate with their bachelor's or their master's, and to have those kids burn out, or have those young people or those young adults burn out and have so much to give and have no place to give it, it just sits in my heart so deeply. I want them to use their music. I want the world to have more music in it. I remember sitting and listening to these incredible youth playing in this concerto competition and seeing that there were only a few of us listening. And I thought it was glorious music. And I felt so full and enriched by the experience. And it hurt my heart to realize that there were only a few of us there to enjoy it. And so anytime I think there is talent that's going unused or doesn't have a voice, it feels like I need to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what, but I just feel the fire to try to put myself in a position in whatever way that is to help people to get it out of the case, not to give up, because we need our music warriors. The world is in need of music, probably more now than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And I want people to stand up. If you've been fortunate enough to have the training and to have been given, I mean, you are the fortunate few on this earth to have music. And if you have that training, I want you to use it.
Mm-hmm. And you have an amazing challenge right now. I love what you started with that, the Recital Challenge 2020. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, as I've been kind of going along in my own journey, one thing I can say is, and I think that this is true, and this is why if you were in a bachelor's program, master's program, doctorate program, part of that program is all about, recital. That's what you're working for. And you'll be giving juries, and then you'll also be giving recitals. And part of the reason for that, I think, is because it's such a growing experience to give a full-length recital. Now, I don't think when I made this challenge, I don't think everybody is ready for a full-length recital. And I don't think that everybody needs to give a full-length recital. Only the people who are out there know where they're at and know what they can give. And maybe for some people, it will just be a performance and they're getting it out for the first time in such a long time. And maybe one performance is going to be great. Maybe some people are in a position that it's been a few years, but they're capable of giving that full length recital and they need the challenge and they need the push. To me, it's a great idea. It was just a great idea because I thought, well, we're doing all this practicing with the 100 days of practice challenge, which I think is marvelous and amazing and has done such incredible good for so many. But then to start sharing it with others, I felt like was the next step. So in my mind, I just thought, well, is there some way we could just give more music this year? So that was but it's really not that complex. I just wanted, in whatever way I could, to encourage people to continue to challenge themselves with their music and to share it.
And I think it's so great because preparing for a recital like this is, or any kind of concert, can be kind of a solitary activity. And by doing so, you're creating a community, there's support, there's encouragement. And also maybe exactly as you said, some people might need kind of an incentive, or they need someone like you to light their fire to play a recital.
Well, I think that, back in the days when I wasn't playing, I did run a couple marathons, and then I also, did 10K. I was running a lot. And, it's interesting to me, the sport of running, if you want to participate, you just enter a 10K or you enter a 5K, and nobody cares if you win, and nobody cares if you're going to get any money for it. You just, you have a personal goal that you want to achieve, and so you achieve it. And it's really exciting to watch all the runners come across the line for the marathon, because you know that there are personal victories that are happening out there that are just as magnanimous and incredible as anybody who wins the race. Now, it's wonderful for the ones who win the race, and that's so exciting to watch, and incredible, mind-boggling to see what these humans can achieve with their bodies. But that doesn't take away from the other personal victories that are happening for everybody else who crosses that line. And I felt like, well, shouldn't music sort of do that for people as well? Can't we somehow have something that's sort of like, hey, we want personal victories, personal goals, and we want to achieve them. And you don't have to win, and you don't have to make money. You can just share. And I think that's a really good place to start for anyone who has let it lapse, or anyone who needs to rebuild the fire. Because you're right, a recital is a very solitary experience, and you get to program whatever you want. And so I'm sure there are these wonderful pieces, like for me, it was the Lark Ascending. And I finally learned that piece. I actually didn't learn it in college, but I eventually did learn it. And there are these things that are deep in your soul. And I hate to think that you would not do it because other things got in the way or other distractions. So it's time. It's time to get those things out and say, before I die, I will play this piece. This is so meaningful to me. So anyway, that was the idea.
I think it's a fabulous idea, and I hope that those who are interested consider joining your Facebook group about that. And I'm going to put the link to the group in the show note.
Thank you very much. It's just a new group, and hopefully it will be very helpful. I have definitely linked your podcast as well as any other resources that I can find, and I encourage musicians to publish their own recital publicity, because I'm hoping that we can, definitely give each other a lot of support based on, we can probably say, hey, good luck on the day of the concert.
And the thing is, preparing for a concert is, there's so many nooks and crannies, or I could say, now I'm thinking in French, but mount and valleys, if that makes sense, where, one day things are going well and you feel great. And then, then you're kind of in the slump for a few days where you feel like you're making no progress, and you're all alone in your practice room with no one to share your fears and your frustrations with. So now there's a place to go and share and find support and encouragement.
Well, and performing is really its own unique skill. It's not like practicing. And, I think it was Midori who said, one performance is worth 1,000 practice hours. And I really understand what she means by that. A performance, we're learning all sorts of other coping sorts of skills that are very hard to practice. You can, to a certain extent, practice those things, but really the best way to learn is performing. And I think a lot of people shut down their music because they have anxieties or difficulties performing. And I have found that almost everybody experiences some sort of anxiety with performing. And I am hoping that through this group, that since we have professionals and we have amateurs and we have everybody, that maybe we can have those resources available to help people overcome those challenges that would otherwise shut them down.
And that's the other thing I love as well. You just said there's professionals, there's amateurs, there's everybody. And that's what I'm loving with what is happening these days. I feel like the musical community is really coming together where there's less and less separation between the so-called professionals and amateur. And I just love how it all comes together by serving the same purpose and really sharing the same love for music.
You're so right. I love how you just said that. That's exactly how I feel. It's thank goodness for the internet. In fact, I mean, I have to call out Lori Niles here for starting violinist.com. You know, I don't participate there too much anymore, but in the beginning years when I had no one, I was just getting out this violin again, and I didn't have teachers or anything. And I will say that for the first few years that I came back to the violin, I mean, a lot of it was happening. A lot of my training came straight from that resource. So I don't think we can underestimate the power of, you know, the connectivity that we have nowadays. I think it's wonderful, and it gives opportunities for groups who have traditionally been sidelined. Like myself, I didn't have festivals or great training, but and all of that I couldn't have had when I was younger. But now it's all available and it's online. I can't thank all of the people enough who have put their time and energy towards giving their music. It's helping all of us.
Absolutely. I'd like to jump back just a little bit because we were just talking about performance preparation and practicing. And what I love from your perspective is that you walked away from a while and now you're back with passion. And I'd love to know how different your practice is now, if it is different, what has changed. And because you've so generously shared with us how you prepared for the recitals that you had last year. And it was so interesting to follow your process and see how thorough you are. And I'd love to hear about this practicing.
I definitely feel that having had other performance experiences always informs how you're going to practice the next time. And I have a few friends who've said things. I have one friend who told me an amateur. I don't like that word, because to me, actually, Joseph Silverstein said, I am an amateur. And I listened to him say this for 5 summers in a row. Every single summer he would say the thing, I am an amateur. Because he liked to say that amateur, the root of that word is love. And so he plays for love. And he wanted us to always know that he was a musician who played for love. And I respect no musician more than I respect Joseph Silverstein. He was incredible. In any case, so he said, an amateur practices until they get it right, but a professional practices until they can't get it wrong. And that always echoes in my brain. I don't know when that's going to be for me, honestly. But I do know that I one time played through the Preludio of the Bach E major perfectly. And I did have one perfect, well, in terms of accuracy, and mostly what I kind of wanted to do artistically with it. I had one experience performing that to the degree that I wanted to. I mean, there's always things that are lacking. You're always going to come away from a performance, I think, thinking, oh, this or oh, this. But for the most part, and I think what I did that time, and I know it's not that mindful, and maybe I need to take your course because maybe it would be less time consuming. But really what I did is I played through the day before 20 times. And the last few times I made myself play it through twice in a row perfectly from beginning to end. And that took about, I hate to say it, but probably 3 hours. before I finally played through from beginning to end. And it's not rocket science. It's just a lot of work. It just, that's what I found is it's just work. Now, I think there are ways of thinking about it that help. For instance, I try to go on Instagram. I know it's silly, but I do lives and I play for people live. I know that's super scary, but I know that I need performance opportunities because the more I get in front of an audience, the more I'm used to that feeling that you get before you play for an audience. And I don't want there to be, I want to minimize the amount of surprises that I'm going to have on stage as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I can, I try to get used to that feeling. And I've really enjoyed Instagram for its live component because you really can just pop on at any time and say, okay, I'm going to play through the Bach Preludio for all you guys, whoever shows up right now. And, and you've got a performance. I think especially people who are not in school or a regimented program, one of the biggest factors, I think, in our progress or in our continued advancement is performance opportunities, especially from a solo perspective. A lot of us are playing in gigs or playing in groups, playing in orchestras, this and that, but playing solo is a completely different kind of experience. And so you want to have that experience as much as possible. And it's difficult to find it. When you're younger, there's all kinds of, concerto competitions or competitions in general, or opportunities to kind of play. As you age, that they become less and less, and you have to make them kind of happen for yourself. So I've really enjoyed Instagram for that reason, and that is one tool that I use to practice because I know it's important to practice performing. I take as many opportunities to do practice performances as possible. I haven't been lucky enough to really live in a place where I had a lot of colleagues. And so I haven't been fortunate to have that support structure to be able to go play for colleagues. I know that a lot of other professionals talk about playing for colleagues as much as possible. If I had that, I would absolutely do that. I've had to kind of create my own colleague situation by using what was available to me online. And there's a lot available. Mm-hmm. So the fact that I even exist at all is testament to the fact that things are kind of changing as far as our ability to go beyond traditional boundaries.
Mm. One thing I love from your story, and we've heard this from the start, is how resourceful you are in really creating environment and situations that would really help you in, getting to your goal. You won't let anything stop you. You always figure out a way to make what you want happen. And I think that is so great. And the other thing I love is when you're talking about the performance and how you were referring to this quote from Midori that a performance is worth 1,000 practice. And I think that it's because our awareness is so acute in a performance setting. So it's very true, everything that you just said in terms of the importance of playing for colleagues or just the way that you did it, which is to hop online and play live. That requires so much courage, and actually it brings you value and experience, but it also brings value and experience to whoever is listening to what you're doing.
I hope so. I just barely did this insane thing, and I posted a live performance where I made mistakes. And I can play that piece without making mistakes, but I happen to, in this live performance, make mistakes. I know that it's an incredibly charged sort of world that we have about making mistakes. And I really debated whether I would share that or not. It was hard. And it took a lot of, kind of thought process for myself to say, you can do more good with your mistakes than you will do by trying to be something that you're not. And the truth is, I'm not perfect yet. I'm not. I do the best I can. I never want to make errors. I work like crazy to not make errors. And the truth of my situation is I'm a mother, and I have done many weddings, and I'm a florist, and I do, I'm a, runner, and I do all kinds of things. I'm a writer too. So within the scope of everything that I am and who I am, I just have to be happy with that, what I can do. And I think, right now I can tell you there are students in Elizabeth Fadley's class who are not even out of their teens who are much better players than I am. and that, I just think as musicians, we kind of have to let it go a little bit, because I think we need to know from the very beginning. And I know I'm talking to someone right now as I'm going to say this. No one else can do your job. There's not one. And I think we start to feel inadequate. But why would you feel inadequate about doing something that no one else can do except yourself? And I know when I step on that stage, I tell myself, well, right now there's no one in the audience who's prepared to stand up here on the stage and play Schnittke, Prokofiev, Gershwin, and Copland. So I guess it'll have to be me. And that's usually the case. We each have that moment when we're going to share our music. And I think we shouldn't back down because we have some perfectionist problem. And if I could just speak to this very quickly. My husband and I were talking a little bit earlier. He's actually in business, and I used to help him write his business. Well, yeah, I used to help him when he was in an MBA program write his papers. So I had the benefit of learning a lot of things about the business world. Theory of constraints is very interesting, and that definitely has applications in the music world. But the one I'm thinking about now is called the agility method. And I think anybody who's in the IT world will definitely know what this is. Basically, it's the idea that things in the tech world, they are moving at such a rapid rate, and things are evolving and changing so quickly that in that world, you can't ever produce, when you're in product development, you can't ever produce a perfect product, because by the time you've produced that perfect product, it will be outmoded and outdated, and it won't be perfect anymore. So the agility method addresses this. And basically what they're doing is they are putting something out there and then allowing customers to kind of drive the modifications that get made to that product. So it's a constant product feedback situation as the product develops, and it's in a constant state of development based on the feedback that they're getting from their customers. And it's really the best model. And I like to think of performance and practicing in that way, that we're a continually evolving, human being who's continually evolving in our art. Nothing that you ever are going to put out there is going to be perfect. And the moment that it's perfect, we're going to change fashions, or people are going to stop liking slides, or they're going to like slides, or they're, or these perfect bow changes that we thought were incredible. Now we're kind of looking for something a little more raw. I don't know. Art is not stagnant. It's constantly evolving. And so I think sometimes we shut ourselves down in that creative process simply because we're trying to adhere to rules more than we are trying to adhere to the overall goal of sharing a message. And especially sharing an authentic message straight from ourselves. And that's when I want to get back to this idea that you are the only one who is capable of giving your unique gift. And so there really this idea of competition. I mean, nothing against competitions. They're great. I have participated in them and watched them and helped with them. But the price that we pay sometimes for that is that we forget our own worth. And that is a heavy price.
Absolutely. And what I love about the message that you have as well is that you show us that we don't need permission. We don't need the endorsement of a committee somewhere, somehow, that says, yes, this person is allowed to perform. This is totally up to us. And we really actually have the power to do it.
Yes. I mean, sorry if I ruffle feathers. Anyone who thinks I'm, not worthy of playing. I mean, I apologize, but I'm only allowed one life to live. And, and when I had, I guess having that ear problem really just woke me up in such a profound way, because I have these ears on loan for however long I have them. And I want to do as well as I can with them. It doesn't mean that I'm not interested or not thinking about the traditions. I definitely am. That's why I sought Nina Belina out. She's an incredible champion for the art. And I wanted that. But I also feel that it's incredibly vital for us each to go within ourselves and remember that fire, why we loved it in the first place. And not be afraid of that, even if we may at times feel like our gift is unworthy. I don't know where we get that. I don't know why there's shame involved in music. It seems so antithetical, the concept of shame, to music. And I don't know why it's anywhere near us, honestly.
Yeah. And you say this, and I wrote down another quote from your website that I loved. When you say, remembering what it was like to fall in love with this music for the first time is my prescription for dispelling the abstraction and seeing clearly once again. I just love that.
Well, isn't that the truth?
Mm-hmm.
Coming up to the music again and seeing once more that beautiful little indication of da-da, da-da, that's always in Bach, da-ba, da-da-da-da-da-dum. I mean, it's beautiful. To me, it's the heartbeat, da-bum, da-bum, and it's all over his music. And, you come up against something like that, and all of a sudden the fire's lit again, and you say, what genius, how wonderful. I hope that I can bring that out in performance. I hope that the people in my audience will hear and feel at a visceral level this heartbeat, this pulse that drives and shows us eternity, Anyway, that's how I feel about Bach.
Kimberlee, thank you so much for all of this. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we do a quick or not so quick round of rapid fire questions?
Yes, actually, I was just thinking, I want to share out of a book, one of my favorite books. It's called The Guns of August. It's by Barbara Tuchman. It's about World War I. And the miracle of the Marne is what they call it. But basically, the Germans had come up with a plan for this war effort, and they had scripted every moment. I mean, it was really an itinerary down to the very last hour of everything that would happen. And they'd really choreographed a victory is what they did. It was called the Schlieffen Plan, I believe. And anyway, it was going like clockwork, Schlieffen Plan. And it was going like clockwork until they got to the Marne. And the French and the British knew that any closer and they would overtake Paris, and then it would be over. And so they got to a point where we cannot lose. And that was basically the speech that they told them. There is no way you can fall back. Die before you fall back. And it's interesting, this quote always gets me choked up. It is the German leader talking to the others, or he's speaking about those soldiers that he saw fight. And he said that men will let themselves be killed where they stand. That is a well-known thing and counted on in every plan of battle. But that men who have retreated for 10 days, sleeping on the ground and half dead with fatigue, should be able to take up their rifles and attack when the bugle sounds is a thing upon which we never counted. It was a possibility not studied in our war academy. And I love that quote because I think it talks about performance in this way. When you get on the stage, you can stand confidently within yourself, knowing that there's no retreating. There's just moving forward. And that's all that's required. And that day turned the tide of the war, and they won. Eventually. Actually, it ended in a stalemate that lasted for 4 years. But in any case, all of the plans, all of the things that were supposed to happen through a great act of will went a completely different direction. And that's why I like to think no one is really in charge of your destiny but yourself. And I think it's worth the fight. And I think that anything that's in your soul that you love is worth the fight. It's worth standing up there. It's worth doing what you have to do to be able to finally get there. And I'm talking as a fighter. There's not really any part of what I have with my violin that I didn't fight for. Nothing was really handed to me. I've been very grateful and very fortunate to have received some help along the way from some very important and beautiful people and beautiful humans. And I think that happens for everyone as we continue to move forward and just take that step into the darkness. So that's why I gave the challenge. I want everyone to take that step into the darkness and move forward. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this, Kimberlee. Okay, how about a round of rapid fire questions?
Yes.
I know we've talked a lot about your life, but I would still love to hear about what it looks like now with all of your activity and your family and all of that stuff. So can you tell us a little bit about what your life looks like?
Probably like a very hectic junk shop. I don't know. That's kind of what it looks like. I'm teasing. But honestly, I feel like it's constant adaptation. Because I never know when a child is going to have a crisis, for instance. And that's my first job. So that's my day job. And if a child has a crisis, then, I will have to adapt my schedule to meet that. And I think that has a lot to do with adapting expectations as well. I think to a certain extent, when I was running the marathons, one thing that I did was that, I really wanted to get a really great time. And there's no end of money or time that you can spend preparing for a marathon to just get your absolute best performance. And I think we would all really love our very best performance. But the reality was that at that time, I was a mom and I had babies at home. And so the best I could do was to get up at 3 a.m. and go do my running so that I'd be home by the time they woke up. And that's the truth. I would get up at 3:30 and I go do my run. And then I had to be done. And that was the only amount of time. And I had to maximize that time. And I think most people are in a situation more like that, where we just don't have every resource available to us to have our very best performance. But during that time, what I learned is that if you can be grateful and if you can approach things with a grateful heart and think, but I had these 2 hours or I had this 3 hours, and you can be grateful for that and let go of your expectations, then you can, run the marathon. You can say, well, I ran the marathon. Maybe it wasn't like everything that I hoped it would be, but I got it done. And so I definitely think that my life kind of resembles that I try to constantly do my very best, but it's my best. And that means shuffling things around a lot. That means being okay with a 20-minute, I literally do. I practice in 20-minute segments. I get something done and then I go do 20 minutes and then I do something else and I practice 20 minutes. It's very rarely that I get a full, 3 hours to myself. And occasionally that does happen for me. My children are much older now and it does change and you do have more time. But that doesn't mean that they aren't on the phone with you or calling you or saying, help me with a paper. So I think that, my life it has certain bounds, but I kind of like that because boundaries aren't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes they keep things in focus. Sometimes boundaries help define the edges of your life that make a very beautiful picture.
That's so well put. And that's a great lesson for everyone, adaptability and great planning and having this respect for boundaries, like you just mentioned. I love that. Do you have a favorite tool in the practice room?
Yes, but it's more of like an implementation of torture. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. But I have, when you walk into, I don't know, a concert or something, and the people have these little people counters, and they'll click on it to let them know how many people came in the door or whatever. I bought one of those because sometimes I just do these mass repetitions of things when I'm really trying to hit a shift, especially. Talk to me about how well that works. Usually it works pretty well, actually, but I lose track of, especially if I'm doing a repetition of like 50. And I don't know what it is. I think maybe it's just the clicking sound that I like. I don't know. It's probably some little OCD thing, but I like that little clicker because it helps me. And I know when I get the clicker out that I'm totally serious about this. I am going to get this shift. So I like my clicker.
It's so funny what you say because it really makes me think that, yes, in a way, maybe it's a ritual, but it's so true that rituals can help us they can help us get ourselves in the mindset to accomplish something.
Yeah, I think it's very much centered in my will. And so I think whenever I've accomplished anything, it's usually because I finally just, something in my mind just snaps. And I think, no, it's now time. I will do this. And I feel like almost every time I'm going to accomplish something, that kind of drive and passion to accomplish it usually happens. I will do this. Today, I will accomplish this measure, and I will not leave this practice room until this measure is seen to,
Oh, I love that. Do you have a favorite performance that has stayed with you throughout the years, and why?
Okay, this is not my performance. This is, well, I'll tell you two. This is a performance of a friend of mine. I have kind of an interesting story about my violin. The man who made it had been kind of badgering me about making me a violin. And I had just bought one, and I was actually sharing it with another young violinist who had a promising future, but no access to any kind of instrument. And I just barely bought this one, and it was as much as I could afford. And I actually put our entire life savings down on that violin back then. And so I was not really anxious to, have this guy make me a violin. First of all, I couldn't afford it. And second of all, it was, we were sharing this violin, and I knew that this young man liked that violin at least. So anyway, this violin maker kept badgering me about it. And he finally said, well, I finally told him why I didn't want to do it. And he said, well, how about this? You trade me that violin and I'll make you two, one for you and one for the young man. And that was something I couldn't refuse. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience. So now that young man has a violin and I have one too. And I love that violin. So anyway, when he came, we all got together, this young man and his teacher and me, and we went to a pianist's house, and we were just all kind of playing these new violins around. And his teacher played the vocalise, I believe. And I don't know what it was. It wasn't, perfect but to me, it was absolutely glorious. There was so much feeling in that. And there was just so much energy in that room because of what had just transpired and the goodness and the caring of this violin maker to do something so gracious for a young man who needed an instrument. And so that was one. And number two, was actually a funeral. And I think of funerals as being an incredibly beautiful experience and usually pretty spiritual as a musician, because I think that, words, you can kind of meet with a person, in their struggles and their suffering, but musicians, we have the unique capacity to actually be with someone in their agony and suffering. Mm-hmm. The music goes exactly to that space, and we hold in that same space as those who are grieving. And so I've always felt like this incredible blessing when I have the opportunity to memorialize someone's life and, in a way, act as a healing conduit for those who are suffering from the loss. And I remember playing one time and thinking to myself, I had just an extra capacity that day for some reason, and thinking, I don't think I could make a mistake. And then I remember in my mind, you'll laugh because it's such a mind game. So I remember in my mind having that thought, I don't think I could make a mistake. It's just flowing so easy. And then I thought, I'll try. And so I tried to make a mistake, and it didn't actually, and then I had to save myself, because I realized, no, you're still driving this car. And if you really want to make a mistake, you will. But in any case, that was probably my, the performance that I look back at and think, I wish I could have that experience every time I play.
Mm. Yeah, don't we all?
Yes. Flying.
Absolutely. Yes. Kimberlee, what's the best advice that was given to you that you would like to pass on to the listeners?
Oh gosh, there's so much. That's a tough one, but I'm going to give you a couple. And they came actually from an old high school rival. And she told me, she said, I found that I could get very good at the violin if I would just keep going, because most people give up. And so along the way, as she just kept going and she kept improving, all sorts of other people dropped out. And she just kept going and kept improving. So not that I want to make it a comparison thing, but I felt like that's really guided me, because as an example, I have a friend who's a cellist in New York, excellent cellist. And I remember one time he said something about, but, I'm really just a chamber musician, a good chamber musician. And I think to myself, yeah, but do you have to, if you didn't want to be that, couldn't you go find a, hut someplace and squirrel yourself away in there and practice scales like crazy and, work your brains out until you could come out, emerge a new creation of yourself, a new iteration. And so when I think of, I found that I could become very good if I just wouldn't quit. And I think that also has to do with the level at which we're pushing ourselves. So, you can kind of plateau and stop taking on challenges. But that's another reason that I made the Recital challenge, because I feel like taking the risks and taking the challenge is about the growth. And shouldn't that be what we're kind of invested in? Mm. It's about growth. At the end of the day, this violin, this instrument, flute, piano, whatever you're playing, it's about your own human experience, your own journey, and your growth. That's what it's about. Mm-hmm. And that's what will give you the fire. I think, didn't Camus say something like, the struggle to the heights itself is enough to fill a man's soul. Mm. In other words, it's not the plateau of nirvana of just, existing and being, kind of coasting and finding your balance point that brings the joy. It's the struggle itself. It's the work. Go, if you want to be satisfied in your music, go find something to work on that, stretches you, challenges you. That's where the happiness is, mm-hmm. I find.
Absolutely. Kimberlee, how about a quick actionable tip that listeners can implement today in their practice or their musical lives?
Here's just one little one from a mommy. I think gratitude should be where every practice starts.
Mm.
And so if you're going to do an actionable tip, it would be to start your practice grateful for your ears.
Mm.
Be grateful that you have them and that you have this ability through these senses and through your body to make connections with other humans, to send messages, to express. And I think that gratitude is probably the very best tool for any musician.
I love this. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. I am very grateful for you. See, I'm starting my practice right already. Today, I'm starting my practice. I'm grateful for Renee Paul and her wonderful Mind Over Finger podcast.
Thank you. Kimberlee, I'm so happy that you took my invitation and that we had this chance to sit and chat for a little bit, because I find everything that you do so inspiring. I think that your mission is so noble and so needed. And I hope that, first of all, I hope we have a chance to meet in person soon. But I really hope that many people will take on the challenge and join you in this wonderful adventure. And I'm so grateful that we could chat together today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with violinist Kimberlee Dray. There's so many incredible lessons from Kimberlee's attitude towards life, and she's an amazing example of how powerful the human spirit gets when it's determined to overcome adversity. She got resourceful and figured out ways to implement structures and systems that would create the reality she wanted to live. It's this wonderful adaptability that she talks about. And I also love what she said about letting go of expectations and figuring out a way to do the best that can be done in the moment. That's so often when we're tempted to give up, but having this approach can really help us stay in the game and move forward. And another point that she brought up that I want us to keep in mind is what she says about setting up her mind and deciding, I will do this. Adopting this mindset, deciding that you can do it, you can do hard things, is really the first step in succeeding and overcoming any challenge, big or small. And I can't think of a more apropos or on-point message in the middle of this unprecedented situation that we're all going through right now. On a lighter note, Kimberlee wanted to add that the repetition work that she mentions doesn't involve mindless repetitions, and that she's always careful to be fully present and making each one count. Before I let you go, I have a few announcements. As I was trying to find meaning in all of this, I really felt the need to create something positive in the middle of this mess. And I wanted to bring all of us together in this shared musical experience. So I started the Joyful Practice Challenge in the Tribe, my private Facebook group. So join the community there at facebook.com/groups/mindoverfingertribe. Every day I share tips on how to bring more joy and efficiency in your music making, and you'll get to be inspired and encouraged by the amazing tribe members who are participating and sharing their experience and their findings. The challenge goes on until March 31st, and you can join anytime. Also, as I mentioned in the intro, the String Virtual Summit is being offered again for absolutely free starting this Monday, the 23rd. It's an incredible resource with interviews with an amazing lineup of over 30 music experts, including Kimberlee and me, discussing every topic you can think of, from practice to performance preparation, anxiety management, entrepreneurship, overcoming injuries, and so much more. You can find more info at stringvirtualsummit.com. So that's it for today. Please let's stay in touch. Let us know what your thoughts are after listening to our conversation and how you're doing in the current circumstances. Kimberlee is both on Facebook and Instagram. You can also find more info about Kimberlee on her website at kimberleedray.com. As always, I'll have all those links in the show notes. I send you all tons of love and my absolute best thoughts. Again, thank you and à bientôt.